May 14th, 1607, 104 men stepped off 3 ships and planted a stake in Virginia mud. Within 8 months, 2/3 of them were dead.
And this right here, the ground where we're standing on, is where it all happened. 3 places, 1 story, the birth of America.
USA 250.
King James I signed a charter that gave a group of London entrepreneurs, the Virginia Company, permission to colonize the coast of North America.
The instructions were simple. Find and build a secure settlement, find gold, and establish a water route through the Pacific Ocean. And whatever you do, don't let the Spaniards find you.
On December 6, 1606, 3 ships pushed off from London: the Susan Constant, the Godspeed, the Discovery.
104 men and boys, some of them trained soldiers, some of them craftsmen and laborers, some of them gentlemen who had never done a day of physical work in their lives.
All of them were told that they were going to make their fortune.
None of them were told what Virginia would actually cost them. So I'm here at the bow of the Godspeed, where you can get on, you can go from bow to stern, you can go downstairs. It's amazing how much cargo and people that was actually loaded onto this ship and sailed from England all the way over to Virginia.
They made land at the Chesapeake Bay on April 26, 1607. They spent 3 weeks exploring the river, looking for the right place.
On May 13th, 1607, they found it.
Or so they thought.
The Virginia Company had given the colonists a list of criteria for choosing their settlement site, and on paper, Jamestown Island met every one of them.
The water was deep enough for their ships to tie directly to the trees on the shoreline. They could unload without building a dock.
The island was set 60 miles upriver from the Chesapeake Bay, far enough inland that Spanish warships couldn't fire directly into the fort.
And the land appeared to be uninhabited by the Powhatan people who controlled this entire region.
3 criteria, 3 checks, site selected.
Here is what the Virginia Company's checklist did not include.
The island was a marsh, low-lying, swampy ground that flooded with the tides, overrun with mosquitoes. Crossing the swamp is a little stinky.
And the river at this point is tidal, which means the water they were drinking, was brackish, part salt, part fresh. Not enough salt to taste, more than enough to kill you slowly.
The colonists didn't have wells yet. They were drinking directly from the James River, downstream from their own waste.
The fort went up in 6 weeks. Triangular walls, 3 bulwarks with cannon, a church, a storehouse, and a row of houses inside the palisade.
By June 22nd, Captain Christopher Newport sailed back to England to fetch more supplies.
And with days of his leaving, the dying started.
George Percy, one of the colonists who survived that first summer, wrote it all down. His words have survived 400 years.
He wrote that the men were dying of swellings, fluxes, fevers, by famine, and sometimes by wars.
By the time Captain Newport returned from England in January of 1608, only 38 were still alive.
66 people gone in 8 months.
Not one of them killed in a major battle. Not one of them lost at sea.
They drank the river. The river killed them. For most of American history, the story of Jamestown came down to a single explanation.
The wrong people were sent.
Lazy gentlemen who wouldn't work, who expected the land to feed them, who sat inside that fort waiting to get rich while the colony fell apart around them.
It's a story that's been told for 4 centuries in textbooks, in documentaries, in classrooms.
And archaeology blew a significant hole in it.
And Jamestown is still a live archaeological site. These workers back here are still digging up things that were from the original English colonies.
What the ground here has revealed over 30 years of excavation is something different. A community that was trying to make it. Craftsmen who brought their tools and used them. Soldiers who built a military sound fortification in 6 weeks. in an unfamiliar wilderness.
People killed not by their own laziness, but by a water supply that would have poisoned anyone, by a drought that was starving the Powhatan as well, by decisions made 3,000 miles away by men who had never set foot in Virginia.
For nearly a century, the history of Jamestown was built on a belief that the evidence had washed into this river, that this fort behind me, was gone forever.
In 1994, one archaeologist with a spade proved that wrong. For years, the accepted belief about Jamestown was simple. The James River had eaten the western shore of this island. The original 1607 fort, ground zero for English America, had eroded into the water.
There was nothing left to find. An archaeologist named William Kelso didn't believe it. In April of 1994, Kelso put a spade into the ground between the old church tower and the riverbank. His best hope was that he might find a small fragment of the original fort.
Within hours, he had pottery, armor, objects that dated unmistakably to the early 1600s, to the very roots of this country.
Over the 30 years since that first dig, the Jamestown Rediscovery Project has recovered millions of artifacts from inside that fort.
Kelso called it Ground Zero, where America began.
And he was right, not as a slogan, as a literal geographic fact. This ground, this specific outline in the earth, is where the English-speaking world put down its first permanent roots in North America.
Everything that comes after, Williamsburg, Yorktown, 1776, every bit of it traces back to this triangular fort on this island in the summer of 1607.
In 2026, 419 years after those three ships landed, America is marking its 250th anniversary. The celebrations are in Philadelphia, in Washington, across the country.
But the story didn't start in Philadelphia. It started right here in the swampy island of the James River with 104 people who were told that they were going to make their fortune and discovered instead that survival would be enough.
The ideals of July 4th, 1776 are more meaningful, not less, when you know the ground they were built on and what it cost to hold that ground.
240 people are locked inside this fort.
But by spring, only 60 were still alive. 180 people died on this very ground in one winter.
And what those 60 survivors did, and what they wrote about afterward, historians refused to believe for 400 years.
Until 2012, when a forensic scientist opened a cellar that had been sealed since 1610.
And found proof. 38 survivors from that first catastrophic summer of 1607. John Smith, the one man who understood that work meant survival, was in charge.
And then, in 1609, three things happened, and each one made the next one worse.
First, John Smith.
A gunpowder explosion injured him badly enough in early October that he had to sail back to England for treatment. He never returned to Virginia.
Second, the Sea Venture.
The flagship of the resupply fleet carrying the new governor and most all of the new colonial leadership was wrecked.
And it turns out the Sea Venture disaster helped inspire one William Shakespeare, Willie Shakes, the bard himself. The Sea Venture disaster is thought to have inspired one of Shakespeare's final works, The Tempest.
And third, the thing that sealed it?
When the resupply ships finally did arrive, their passengers were already half-starved from the Atlantic crossing. The textbooks mentioned the starving time. What they don't tell you is what the colonists were actually eating.
Colonists didn't just starve, they were trapped.
The Powhatan Confederacy, the powerful network of Algonquian-speaking tribes that controlled the entire region, had been watching the English struggle for 2 years. In 1609, they made a decision.
They laid siege to the fort. Anyone who left the palisade walls risked being killed. And Chief Powhatan understood exactly what that meant. Without access to the river, without the ability to hunt for forage, the English would starve.
Powhatan understood something the Virginia Company back in London never did.
This was a food war.
And he controlled the food.
Percy documented watching men try to slip past those walls to find anything edible. Most of them didn't come back.
By December 1609, 240 people were locked inside a triangular fort roughly the size of a city block.
And the food was already gone.
Percy wrote it all down because he knew what he was writing would be hard to believe.
Percy's account describes a descent that moved in stages. And when you read it, you know exactly when hope runs out.
Stage 1, they ate the stored food. What was left of it, gone within weeks.
Stage 2, they ate the animals. The horses first, then the dogs, then cats.
And then Stage 3. In the summer of 2012, archaeologists excavating inside the original fort footprint opened an L-shaped cellar. It had been filled in and sealed around 1610.
In that cellar, in a layer of discarded animal bones and food waste, they found something else.
More than a dozen fragments of a human skull and a severed shin bone belonging to a girl.
The remains were sent to the Smithsonian's National Museum of Natural History in Washington for precise analysis.
Dental development, bone growth plates, unerupted wisdom teeth.
She was 14 years old.
It was the first forensic evidence of survival cannibalism at an early European colony in North America.
And they named her Jane. They don't know her real name. They don't know with certainty how she died. The marks are post-mortem, meaning she was already dead when this happened.
Isotopic testing tells us she was from southern England, probably lower class, possibly a maidservant. She may have arrived at Jamestown in August of 1609, just months before the worst winter in the colony's history. By May of 1610, the 60 survivors at Jamestown were barely functioning. George Percy, their leader, called them the most feeble wretches.
Thomas Gates, their governor who had been shipwrecked in Bermuda for nearly a year, finally arrived in Virginia, and what he found was a colony that was unrecognizable.
Gates made a decision, rational, defensible, completely understandable.
He ordered the colony abandoned. They would sail for Newfoundland, catch a fishing vessel home to England, and Jamestown would be finished.
They actually boarded the ships.
They pushed off from this shore.
And then, coming up the James River, they saw sails.
On June 10th, 1610, Lord de la Warr, the new governor, arrived from England with 3 ships and roughly 150 settlers.
Gates turned the ships around,
They came back to this shore.
and Jamestown survived.
The men who signed the Declaration of Independence, who built the argument that human beings have inherent rights, they were building on something that survived by the thinnest possible margin.
60 people, 1 ship, 1 week.
The ideals of 1776 are more meaningful, not less, when you know how close the entire foundation came to disappearing in the winter of 1609.
In the year 1619, 2 things happened on this ground. They happened within weeks of each other. They were connected by the same governor, the same colony, the same half-mile of riverbank.
One of them is the reason America has Congress today.
The other is the reason America is still reckoning with itself today.
470 years later, both stories still start right here.
By 1619, Jamestown had stabilized, not thrived. The population had grown back to roughly 900 people, scattered across several settlements along the James River.
We are now headed to the church that held some of the most notable funerals and weddings. I'm standing in the church where Pocahontas and John Rolfe actually got married. Pocahontas was a young Native American who was kidnapped by the settlers in 1613. John Rolfe, the same man who married Pocahontas, had spent years experimenting with a milder strain of tobacco leaf that the English market would actually buy. By 1617, Virginia was exporting tobacco. By 1619, it was the only thing the colony ran on.
And tobacco required labor, enormous amounts of labor. That fact is not incidental to what happens in 1619.
In 1618, the Virginia Company, back in London, issued a new set of instructions to the colony, a complete restructuring of how Virginia would be governed.
Out went the military rule, in came something that had never existed in the English-speaking New World before.
Representative government.
In the summer of 1619, the new governor, Sir George Yardley issued a call to every settlement along the James River.
Elect 2 representatives, send them to Jamestown. 11 settlements responded. 22 men made the journey.
On July 30th, 1619, those 22 men, together with Governor Yardley and his council, gathered in the choir of the wooden church at Jamestown. 22 men crammed into a wooden church in a Virginia swamp in the middle of July, one of them dying before it was over.
And in 5 days, they changed the course of Western democracy.
The first General Assembly of Virginia lasted 5 days, and in those 5 days, those 22 men established something that continues to this day.
They created laws governing the tobacco trade. They regulated relations with the Powhatan people. They established the Church of England as the official Church of Virginia. They addressed gambling, swearing, idleness.
And they did something that mattered far more than any single law they passed.
They established the principle that the people living in Virginia had the right to participate in their own governments.
Consent of the governed.
Not as an abstract idea, as an actual meeting in an actual building with actual elected representatives who could debate, vote, and send laws back to London for approval.
The Virginia General Assembly has met continuously from that July, 1619, to today. It is the oldest continuous lawmaking body in the Western Hemisphere, and now they assemble in Richmond.
George Washington served in it. Thomas Jefferson, Patrick Henry.
And then 3 weeks later, something arrived on the James that would cast a shadow over everything.
John Rolfe, the same John Rolfe who documented the first assembly, wrote a letter that same year to Sir Edwin Sandys in London.
In it, he described a ship that arrived at Point Comfort, the southern tip of Virginia Peninsula, in late August of 1619. So the map behind us tells us how slaves ended up in Virginia. It was a Portuguese slave ship headed for the Gulf of Mexico when there it encountered English privateers, who then subsequently took those slaves from the Portuguese slave ship and brought them to Jamestown.
In 2026, as America marks 250 years, the honest account of 1619 is not that it undermines the founding, it's that it helps explains it.
The greatness of American democracy and the tragedy of American slavery were not opposites. They were born together on this island.
We moved 50 miles up the road to a place that took everything Jamestown started, the tobacco economy, the representative government, the tensions, and built it into something more formal, more deliberate, more powerful.
Colonial Williamsburg, where the ideas that became the Declaration of Independence were tested, argued, and refined.
The most famous idea in American history didn't start in Philadelphia.
It started here in Williamsburg.
On June 12, 1776, George Mason's Declaration of Rights was adopted. 16 articles.
Article 1, all men are created equal, free, and independent. Unless, of course, you were a slave, and that didn't come for another 100 years.
The same week, Thomas Jefferson was already drafting the Declaration of Independence.
Same ideas, same words.
Jefferson didn't invent American freedom. He borrowed it from a guy in Williamsburg.
3 places, 1 story, the birth of America.
USA 250.
For 75 years, Williamsburg was the political capital of the largest and wealthiest colony in British America.
Virginia stretched from the Atlantic to the Mississippi. Its population was larger than Massachusetts and Pennsylvania combined.
The House of Burgesses was the oldest elective legislative body in North America. It had been arguing with royal governors since 1619.
By 1765, the Burgesses had 146 years of practice.
That's what the British didn't understand.
They weren't arguing with amateurs. May 30th, 1765, a 29-year-old backwoods lawyer stands up in the House of Burgesses.
Patrick Henry had no business doing what he was about to do.
He's only been in office for 9 days.
The Stamp Act had just passed in London. Parliament was going to tax every legal document, newspaper, and playing card in the colonies. Most Burgesses wanted to protest politely. Henry did not.
Henry introduced 7 resolutions. They became known as the Virginia Resolves. The first 4 were legal arguments. The last 3 were a threat. One of them even stated that anyone who enforced Parliament's tax in Virginia
should be considered an enemy of the colony.
That is not polite protest. That is a legal framework for rebellion.
Within 6 weeks, Henry's resolves were reprinted in newspapers from Boston to Charleston. The other colonies started copying them, and the Stamp Act was repealed the following year. One of the highlights of visiting Williamsburg are the amazing gardens all over the village.
And there's the maze behind the governor's palace.
I'm a little lost. I've been turned around a few times. Have you figured it out, or are we totally lost in this maze?
Totally lost in this maze.
Yeah, we want to get up there.
Let's promise.
Did we make it? Round and round and round we go. Where we'll end, we have not yet to know. Dead end.
So after getting lost in this maze, we finally found the fact that there's a gravel path that will take you around so we can get up there. When we finally made it up to the platform stage at the top of the hill, the view of the maze was amazing.
I couldn't believe how simple it looks from above. In 1774, Lord Dunsmore dissolved the House of Burgesses in that building right there.
Yeah, he kicked them all out, but they were like, you know what? We still have work to do.
So they decided they were going to keep governing by walking about 150 feet or so down this street, and they were going to meet in, of all places, a tavern.
The Raleigh Tavern.
The Apollo Room at the Raleigh Tavern, where the Burgesses kept meeting, unofficially, illegally.
We're checking out the tavern.
The First Continental Congress met 4 months later. Well, there wasn't email or airplanes yet, so it took a little while to get the news and travel.
Dunmore thought he was silencing a legislature. What he actually did was create a revolutionary government that didn't need his permission to exist. On April 21st, 1775, 2 days after Lexington and Concord, news hasn't reached Virginia yet. But Lord Dunmore knows something is coming.
This is the gunpowder magazine where all of the gunpowder was stored until, of course, Dunmore came through and had his sailors come and take 20 barrels or 20 half barrels of gunpowder. And so that really upset the people.
He thinks he's disarming a potential rebellion. Ha!
Williamsburg woke up to an empty magazine. Patrick Henry assembled a militia and marched on the governor's palace.
Dunmore paid the colony for the gunpowder to avoid war. And 2 months later, he fled Williamsburg, and he never returned.
The last royal governor of Virginia ruled the colony from a ship. The British had governed Virginia from this palace for 62 years.
And it only took 2 months to lose it.
And if you're a veteran, you and your guests can get a little time off at the Liberty Lounge. Typical flyboy smart aleck.
Oh, versus the Navy smart aleck.
We have our...
It's air conditioned.
Yes, it's a great place to take a load off. It's super hot out here, but that's not stopping us from having coffee.
Which you get for free.
So what do you think so far of Williamsburg?
Well, it's really great to be able to sit down after you've been walking for a while,
It is
especially
a
when it's
walking-
90 degrees.
Yeah, it is a walking experience.
But it's very walkable and it's relatively flat. There's lots of places that are open you got into and get a little bit of air conditioning while you're discovering a little bit of history.
May 1776, the 5th Virginia Convention meets in Williamsburg. On May 15th, they vote unanimously for independence from Britain.
That is 7 weeks before the Declaration of Independence. Virginia didn't wait for Philadelphia. Virginia went first. And then Virginia did something that mattered more. They appointed a 50-year-old plantation owner named George Mason to draft a Declaration of Rights, a document explaining why they had the legal right to leave.
Mason's document was adopted. 16 articles. All men are by nature equally free and independent and have certain inherent rights. Article 2. All power is derived from the people. Article 3. Government exists for the common benefit, protection, and security of the people.
3 weeks later, in Philadelphia, a 33-year-old Virginian named Thomas Jefferson sat down to draft a different document. Quote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights." Same ideas, same structure, Same philosophical framework. Jefferson didn't invent the language of American independence. He borrowed it from a fellow Virginian.
George Mason is one of America's founding fathers, and his words written in this town are the words that became the Bill of Rights. Every right we have as Americans started in an argument that happened here in Williamsburg.
George Wythe was one of George Mason and Thomas Jefferson's legal mentors. A recreation of Wythe's home is open to visitors and is a must-see in order to understand how Williamsburg worked in colonial times.
That includes the slaves Wythe owned.
When the war ended, the capital of Virginia moved to Richmond. Williamsburg was left behind. For 150 years, it was a forgotten town.
In 1926, a priest at Bruton Parish Church convinced John D. Rockefeller Jr. to restore what was left.
Today, Colonial Williamsburg is the largest living history museum in the world.
The golden ball up there, that is the sign for a jeweler. So if you got a golden ball outside of your shop, you must be a jeweler.
300 acres, 80 original buildings, 700 costumed interpreters. The arguments were made here,
The legal case was built here.
but arguments don't win wars.
15 miles east from where we're standing, the last major battle of the American Revolution was fought,
General Cornwallis surrendered 8,000 troops.
effectively ending the war. The treaty came 2 years later, but the fighting was done.
That story coming up next.
The Declaration of Independence in 1776 changed the course of world history.
But America wasn't a free and independent country until it dealt with the threat of the British Army
And that happened here.
in Yorktown, Virginia.
3 places, 1 story, the birth of America.
USA 250. By 1781, the Revolution was 6 years old, and the Americans were struggling.
The Continental Army was broke. Soldiers weren't getting paid, and whole units had mutinied.
The British had changed strategy. They moved the war south. They took Savannah. They took Charleston. It was the worst American defeat of the entire war.
Washington had not won a major battle in years. In the summer of 1781, the British general Charles Cornwallis marched his army into Virginia. He had orders to establish a naval base on the coast.
He chose Yorktown, a small tobacco port on the York River. It had deep water. It had access to the Chesapeake Bay. It was perfect for a resupply by sea.
There was one problem.
Yorktown sits on a peninsula. One way in by water, one way in by land.
If you control the water and you control the land, army on the land is trapped.
Cornwallis was trapped.
Cornwallis wasn't worried because the British always controlled the water. The Royal Navy was the most powerful on Earth. As long as British ships ruled the Chesapeake, Yorktown was a fortress.
And that is the war right there.
So whoever controlled the bay controlled the outcome.
Nearly 500 miles north, Washington had a decision to make. He wanted to attack the British in New York. His French ally, General Rochambeau, disagreed.
Rochambeau knew something Washington did.
French fleet was coming. 28 ships. They weren't going to New York. They were coming to the Chesapeake.
De Grasse was in the West Indies. He brought his entire fleet north, every ship.
So Washington gambled everything. He left a skeleton force outside New York to fool the British, and he marched the combined American and French armies nearly 500 miles south, in secret, in summer, facing a deadline only de Grasse's fleet could meet.
One of the really cool things about this museum is how interactive it can be to really help us understand history. Like the siege and surrender of Yorktown is shown here. What's going on here is we'll be able to see how Cornwallis came from the south up to Yorktown to establish a stronghold there. But while he was doing that, Rochambeau and Washington were coming down from New York. When the two met, Cornwallis was a little stuck. He had troops on either side, but with the French coming in this way and Rochambeau and Washington coming down this way, The siege of Yorktown ended up being the demise of Cornwallis.
If the fleet was late, if the British found out, the whole army would be exposed. Everything depended on ships that no one on land could see.
September 5th, 1781, the Battle of the Chesapeake, arguably the most important naval battle in American history, and there wasn't a single American ship involved.
A British fleet arrived to rescue Cornwallis and control the bay. They expected it to be empty. It wasn't. De Grasse had already arrived.
What happened next decided the war. De Grasse took his ships out of the Chesapeake Bay and into open water. The two fleets fought for several hours.
Neither side lost many ships. On paper, it wasn't even a clear victory. But the British fleet was damaged, and it was outnumbered.
After several days of maneuvering off the coast, the British commander made a decision. He turned his fleet around and sailed back to New York.
He left Cornwallis behind. The Royal Navy, the most powerful military force on Earth at the time, abandoned a British army on a Virginia peninsula.
The moment that fleet turned north, Yorktown was lost.
Cornwallis just didn't know it yet.
Late September 1781, the combined American and French army arrived outside Yorktown, 16,000 troops against Cornwallis's 8,000.
Order and discipline. Pa. Regulations for order and discipline.
Ready. Take aim. Come.
This was not a fair fight. It was never going to be.
The Allies dug trenches. They moved their cannons closer. Night after night, the guns never stopped. Cornwallis was pinned against a river he couldn't cross, waiting for a navy that wasn't coming.
On October 14th, the Allies stormed the last two British strongpoints, redoubts 9 and 10. One was taken by the French, the other by American light infantry, led by a young colonel named Alexander Hamilton.
These cannons may have brush obstructing their line of fire now, but back in 1781, they were crucial to providing the final tactical advantage to shell the British town of Yorktown and eventually end the siege.
With those two positions gone, the Allied guns could hit every part of the British line.
Cornwallis was out of room, out of supplies, and out of time. October 17th, 1781, 4 years to the day after a British army surrendered at Saratoga, a white flag appeared over Yorktown.
2 days later, the British army marched out to surrender.
Roughly 8,000 British troops laid down their arms right on this battlefield.
And Cornwallis didn't even come himself. He claimed he was ill, so he sent his second in command to hand over his sword.
The most powerful empire on earth had just lost a war to its own colonies and to France.
Yorktown was the last major battle of the American Revolution.
The treaty that ended the war came 2 years later, but the fighting ended here.
We're taught that America won its independence, and it did, but it didn't win it alone.
A French fleet closed the bay. French soldiers filled the trenches. French guns broke the line. Without France, there is no victory at Yorktown.
The story started a few miles from here in Jamestown with 104 men and a fort.
And it ran through Williamsburg, through an argument that became a declaration.
And it ended here on a battlefield above a river where an empire gave up.
And America was born.
This is where America was won.
Thanks for exploring it with us.